Hi, I'm Sydney Mullings, and I've been a school director for the past 6 years, and I am really excited to welcome you into the next installment in our school board conversation. We are hoping to open up a dialogue and share with the community insights, learnings, answer questions, and really give an opportunity to have a deep dive on certain topics that you don't often get when we're sitting at school board meetings.
And I'm Marnie Moraldo, and I've been on the board for 16 years. So today we thought we'd have an interesting conversation about the history of our bonds, the growth of the district, and one of the things that has come up recently, how do we count our people? So it's really difficult to explain. There are three pieces we talk about. We talk about capacity, how much can we fill in our buildings. We talk about something called FTE, which stands for full-time equivalent, which is, well, we'll get into that. And then we talk about head count. So I think the best way to think about capacity is imagine that there's 10 chairs in a classroom. That's the capacity of the classroom. On most days, there might be, let's say, 8 kids that are going to be there every day, all day in those seats. Then we have kids, some of them that do running start or maybe work, and so they have some waivers, who are there for part of the day, but not all of the day. So they kind of get counted together. So if you have 2 students that go to school half the day, well, that's 1 FTE, full-time equivalent. So they are the equivalent of 1 student, even though there's 2 of them. But if you count all of those kids together, those 2 kids are 2 head count, right? So that's trying to picture how many kids in those 10 seats do we have. So the capacity is 10 seats. There might be 12 full-time equivalent, which means we're over capacity, and then there might be 15 actual head count. And so that's why you might see numbers, and people are throwing around numbers about, oh, well, there's only this many students. Well, there's actually this many students. So why is it confusing? Because we have different ways of measuring the people in our building.
It's also probably important to say, over the history of counting students, there have been different approaches. So sometimes when we want to go back in history, we have to settle on one of those numbers. In our case, it'll be FTE, because that's what's available back in time.
And really on the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, or OSPI, that's a website that people really go to quite frequently to find out where are you getting the number of how many students there were back in 2006. Now, why do I say 2006? What are we going to talk about?
So what we're going to get into is going back and looking at our past few bonds and talking about what we got from them.
Great. And I think we're going to look at the past 3 bonds that have passed. So all the way back to 2006, and then 2012, and then 2016.
So when we start talking about the individual bonds, what I want to do is start with not only the year, but what the count of our students was at that time. And I'm going to stay with FTE. I'll start with the 2006 bond, but I want to first just share one piece of information. We're going to go back to 1996 and look at how many students did we have in 1996. We had just over 11,000 students. And in the time period between 1996 and our 2006 bond, there was a lot of growth in the district. So once we get to our 2006 bond, we had about 15,000 just over students within our district. So a big bump in growth in what was a short period of time. At that time in 2006, when we went out for the bond, here's the things we got from it. It's actually a pretty cool list when we think about it. We had major remodels of both our Maywood and our Liberty schools. We completely replaced Issaquah High School. And I've seen the pictures of the old buildings, so that's really cool.
Goodness, yeah.
We did an expansion at Skyline and built Creekside Elementary from the ground, as well as a replacement of the Briarwood building. So a lot got done in that year out of our 2006 bond. And what's really great to know about that bond is we're actually going to have that one all paid off next year. So what about the next one?
Well, the next one is in 2012. What is interesting is even though we started a remodeling of Liberty High School, it wasn't enough. And so we actually had to go out for the vote to the voters in 2012 to ensure that we could really do what needed to be done, which was about an 80% remodeling of Liberty High School. We also completely rebuilt Sunny Hills. Clark Elementary was not only rebuilt, it was built on a new piece of property. We swapped where Issaquah Middle was with Clark Elementary. So Issaquah Middle became Clark Elementary and a huge expansion there. And then a completely rebuilt brand new Issaquah Middle School. We also included Gibson Eck in all of that shifting. And then we did some significant increases in classroom space for Apollo and for Issaquah Valley Elementaries. And that bond will be paid off in 2032. And you know, at the time, there was only about a 2,000 student growth in FTE for all of those projects and all of those additions to classroom space.
It's really cool. So now we're 2012, we're at about 17,000 students, right, with that growth. So then let's go forward to 2016, our most recent. At that point, we're at about 19,500 students. And we did some more work to grow in our ever populating district. So we would have had some new builds. So building new Cedar Trails Elementary, building new Cougar Mountain Middle School, a complete rebuild of Pine Lake Middle School, updates to 5 elementary schools, and updates to Beaver Lake Middle School. And we also would have gone out to buy property in order to continue building in the land expansion we needed. Some interesting things about the 2016 bond is at that time, we thought we could take the old admin center, the old admin building, and remodel it on that site. And that's what is exactly what went into the 2016 bond. Then we were like, oh, we need all this new school capacity. So we said we should make it a middle school. And the site was not appropriate for a middle school. And thankfully we didn't build there because there's a creek that keeps coming in closer and closer to the building. So I think the other factor that came into play was the urban growth boundary changes that we talked about in a previous one of our podcasts. And that is, where can we practically build within our district, and really realizing that that admin location, the old admin location, was a prime spot to actually have an educational facility. And so now that has become our early learning center, which we're very proud of having that within our district, and allowing us to look at commercial space for the admin building, commercial space being much more readily available in the area and allow for much more flexibility of use. So a number of buildings and projects delivered from that 2016 bond. So as we continue through our timeline, when we get to 2019, that's when we see peak enrollment in the district. And at that point, we're over 20,000 students. So we continued through that whole time period to climb in enrollment. After that came 2020. And so COVID really did change a lot for all of us, as well as in the enrollment in our schools. And we did see at that point that enrollment started to come down. What we do know, however, though, is that our district has a very good track record of forecasting what our population of students will be. And they do that with internal insights as to the cohorts of our students, like how they move through the grades. They add to that external expertise from a demographer to say, what is our birth rate? What is our housing growth rate? How often are people moving into the district or out? So a lot of good information goes in. And take that expertise to say, over the next period of time, where will the population of our students be? And what we see is that population is going to continue to grow, and it may dip at times as we go forward, but that will continue to rise back to that peak level we saw in 2019. That will be at about 20,000 students again. So what's interesting, though, and I think you mentioned before, is we've seen that high school growth is still going to grow a bit faster. And so we want to just really make sure that we're being thoughtful in how we look at the data, but really know that our district has gotten very good, has always been very good at forecasting where we think our population will be.
So those dips are expected. And in fact, we see them in our projections. We're coming into a slight dip. Again, not nearly all the way down to where we were in 2016. So we still have higher capacity need, especially at the high school level. But we do count those dips into our projections, and they're not going to be material enough for us to make any substantial changes to our course of where we're going with our long-term planning. It will impact operating costs, where maybe we won't hire as many teachers next year as we did last year. But really, it is a manageable growth, and it's been calculated into the future. So the real thing we wanted to talk about is that as elected officials, elected by our community, we have to plan for the future. What does that look like? Mm-hmm. And for us, we have to concern ourselves not just about what do we need today, which we say today we need a new high school, but we have to look into the future. And so really looking at those projections over the next 15 years, there's going to be substantial growth in the high school level. So I go back to imagining, what if we didn't plan? What if we didn't plan back in 2016 to build this new high school as we need? Well, we wouldn't have bought the property. So we've already acquired the property, and we spent $38 million for the 40 acres that were there. So nearly $1 million an acre. Mm-hmm. However, if we were to try to find 40 connected pieces of acreage of land, acreage in our area right now, an acre of undeveloped land will cost like 3 to 4 times that. So it behooves us to really plan on what do we need today and what will we need in the future. And from all of the information that we've gathered, whether it be looking at growth determined by the cities, looking at the Growth Management Act that says that we need to actually anticipate expecting growth in the area, seeing what we're doing as far as industry-wise, and that this is a part of the country and the part of the state that people want to move to. So we have to plan for all of that, and it's really in the best interest of our community for us to start those plans and make those moves now.
Well, we covered a lot of ground.
We did.
Talked about our history of bonds, our history of growth. How do we count growth in our district? Hopefully that was informational. We have a wonderful community, and we've been able over the last 20, 25 years to account for a significant amount of growth. We see that in all these wonderful buildings we talked about today, and we've got some more to do to make sure we're ready for our future.
So Sydney, this has been a lot of information.
Absolutely.
And we're really looking forward to hearing from you. What are your questions? What would you like us to take a deeper dive, maybe do a better explanation than you can find digging through our website? Go ahead, and there's a link down below. You can click that. There's a form to be able to submit a question to us, and we will see what we can tackle on our next podcast.
I love that idea. I can't wait to hear from you.